I mean, once you've learned how to export using Python in Blender, then you can export as an STL, you can export as an FBX, you can do a GLTF. You do have to go through and reset up the export parameters because they're different for each export type. But once you've done that, it
I
saves you so
actually
much
have a
time.
question about that just came into the Discord, which we'll get to in a second.
Awesome. Well, I was just
Yep,
wrapping up there, so fire away.
great. Well, first, we have another question from Jenny. Are you presentable?
Always.
Good.
I'm not going to prove it by standing up.
He might not always be decent, but he's always presentable.
Yes.
Got a question here from Yavuz. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Do feel free to correct me because growing up with a name like Yan, you kind of get used to saying, no, no, my name isn't Yawn. Um,
Yarn.
Exporting from Blender is very complicated. This, of course, depends on coordinate system differences between software.
Yep.
Is there an easy way to export from Blender to game engines, specifically Unity in his case, especially empties for grouping related objects and armatures that don't break too much? I
Well,
got it right.
woohoo! So, I'm going to go ahead and open up a barrel, something nice and simple.
I'm going to mute my typey.
I like that. I've moved it, so I can't find it. Hold on a second. Let me go in. Don't documents. There we go. Repos. Where's the repos? It was at the top. Yep, there it is. Let's go in here. Something like this. So this is from one of the modules of the Blender Creative Suite. This is your basic modeling in Blender. Oh, something's come out pink. I wonder why it's come out pink. I don't think I've used textures in this. So we go through, and this is part of the course where we actually create and use the asset manager in it. Very, very useful because then you can go, I want a car in my scene, and just click and drag it across like so. And it comes in with all the materials. If you've got those applied, maybe a barrel stack, pop that in. Very quick and easy to build up a scene. So when you're exporting something from Blender and you want it to work in Unity, for example, first of all, when you go to your export, if you're doing something like this regularly, here's a great tip for you. So you're always exporting as an FBX, right click and add it to your quick favorites. Then we can go through and say, well, this car queue brings up your quick favorites, and then you can go straight to the export screen. Now, do bear in mind, I'm just going to cancel that for the moment. There is the quick menu there when you press Q, and this comes up, is mode dependent. So if you're actually in edit mode, which you can't do when you drag in an asset like this, but if you were in edit mode, for example, then you would have to switch over to object mode to bring up this particular menu. Right. So when you're in here, one of the things that I always prefer to do, I'm just going to export this wherever. Um, but think about what you want to do and what you want to export. So to answer the question of how to make sure it comes across in Unity correctly, because of the Cartesian, basically Z up, Y up, and it's left-handed versus right-handed. So you're moving between Cartesian coordinate systems. But the main thing to remember is to click this button here that says Apply Transform. That's one of the critical things. Otherwise, when you import it into Unity, it will be gimbal locked. And that will cause you obviously a problem when it comes to rotations. There are other ways around that, like childing your model to an empty and then using that empty as a proxy to control all of that. But that really is starting to add sort of extra complexity where it's not necessary. A couple of the things that I often make sure that I'm doing when I'm exporting, selected objects. That's always a good thing because you very rarely need to export absolutely everything from a scene, especially if you're working on multiple models. Might not be that, but you might not want lamps and everything else coming across as well. So you can obviously control some of that under here as well. So we can do limit to selected objects, or we could do active collection. So you can group everything that you're exporting in a collection and make sure that is, let's come out of here for a second. That is the active collection. So it'll be the one that's selected. Let's go back to our export. Visible objects, it's really good if you're hiding things out of the way. So you might hide out of the way empties and other control things that you've got in Blender that you don't want to export. Then you got your object types, and of course you can control all of this in Python as well. You can say what you want, what you don't. And once you've worked out what you need to do here specifically for your workflow, going back to just incorporating that Python discussion from earlier, once you've worked out what you need to do in order to export, then you can go ahead and script it. And then it'll be a matter of running a script, or even if you get to the point of creating your own add-on, you just click a button on your add-on and it will do it all for you. Now, what tends to happen is that changes from project to project. It might not, but having a script there that you just alter a few lines of and you've got a new script, boom, and it saves you so much time faffing around once you've got those settings done. What it does, unfortunately, sometimes do is it leads you to that where you don't use this for so long you forget what they all do. I've been in that position before. I'll just use my export script, and occasionally Blender will update its Python API and rename something in here in the background, and then your script doesn't work anymore. It can take a bit of debugging to try and work that out. Applying transform is really important. And now, could you reread the question for me, Jan? Because there was an extra bit in there about armatures.
Yes, I can. Let me just go back. Especially empty game objects for grouping related objects and armatures not breaking too much or armatures break too much.
Right. When with empty objects, good luck. Um,
Hmm.
I've not used.
We've had this a lot with Godot, haven't we? Trying to get empties to come through.
So when it comes to empty objects, I've not used Unity in a while, about a year or so, and I've had it export absolutely fine and contain empty control objects, as you're saying, maybe an empty where a light needs to go, so that when you're in engine, you can actually just, you've made the artistic decision in Blender and in the engine, oh, that's where I want the light to go. And indeed, you could script that in engine to find all the empties named lamp or start with lamp and put a light there, just a basic lamp that you could sort out later on. Now that stopped working um, midway through this year because someone had a question, and I had a look at it, and I was left scratching my head, and then it started working again. So I don't know whether or not there was just a problem with the Blender exporter or the Unity importer, or there was a tick box that needed ticking. I would need to have a specific look at that to work out what else needs to be done in order to export, including those. Geometry. We'll go down to armature in a second. We'll just go through the rest of this real quick. Smoothing groups are something that you're going to come across. This doesn't typically affect Unity, but with Unreal, if you leave it as normals only, it will complain when you import that there are no smoothing groups. So switch it to face, and that stops that error coming up every time that it comes up. And if that causes you any issues, usually Edge is fine. But your smoothing groups, for those who want to know a little bit more about that, simply comes down to if you shade something smooth. Blender doesn't call it smoothing groups, by the way. That's something I think that Autodesk and sort of 3ds Max and Maya call them. If we go to the the mesh data properties here, and go down to normals, and we turn on this auto smoothing, there we go. We've got an overall smoothing group applied to the entire model. Now you can also do this by marking specific faces and edges as what is the terminology. If you've ever wondered when you've selected an edge what these other options are, marking sharp. So if you mark something sharp, then it will not be it will be smoothed basically, or not smooth. If it's marked sharp like this, you get this lovely orange line. And then if you shade smooth without this turned on, nope. Where is it? It's under the modifiers, weighted normal, and oh, it does require this auto to be on, like so. It does require that, and then you should be able to keep sharp, and it works out though. So that's important for that. It's not remember. Oh, I'm in edit. Let's see if it switches and remembers. There we go. Quick favorites. We go back to the export. Let's scroll down. We were on geometry before. Let's bring this in. What else have we got? Armature. Right. Every time that I've exported so far, when it comes to models that require a skeletal animation, so you've got basically two types of animation. You've got bone based and then shape key. I'm pretty sure there's other types of animation, like if you in the game engine itself, if you were to code it moving from one place to another, that is a viable option for you. But when it comes to exporting from Blender and keeping animations, it's going to be doing something with this. Either your Armature, which is a bone based rig. I haven't had to change any of these. Occasionally, with a humanoid rig, I can't remember whether the leaf bones need to be on or off, but Unity has an auto rig system built into it. Going back to the original question, and that either needs this on or off. I don't have Unity installed at the moment, so I couldn't test it even if I wanted to. Um, so I think you'll either have to toggle that on or off depending on Unity itself, and then it will actually auto rig your model and match up your bones that you've got to the actual character's bones itself. Baking an animation is another way of sort of animating where you actually cannot alter the bones afterwards. So this is a way of perhaps, or another animation type would be like a physics simulation. And if you are exporting a physics simulation, you probably don't want an FBX. If you're exporting a physics simulation, so you bake all of that information, you've got a building falling down or something along those lines, then instead of using an FBX, that won't be suitable for it. You'll actually want a collider, I believe, which is this one at the top here. And I think Alembic does it as well. And I'm not sure about universal scene description. I don't know if those come across. I've not played with them fully yet. But yeah, if you have an object falling apart and if you've already got the physics baked into it in Blender, why you would do that though, I don't know, because Blender, quite frankly, sucks at physics simulations. It really does depend on what you're trying to do. But if
Tell
you
us how you really feel.
well, the one thing that you can do in Blender is you could do a cell fracture and have the thing crumble apart. That might be a bit more difficult to do within the game engine. So you can do certain things that help out. But if you need to do anything physical that interacts with your player, etc., then I would probably do the physics in the game engine itself, where you can do.